Over to my left is the guy who was here yesterday, did so well, we have him back. Matthew Whitaker, former acting attorney general, the first one to try to land the plane after Jeff Sessions was shown the door. What was your takeaway yesterday?
Well, one of the things that I noticed is what was obvious to us, I think was obvious to all of America. Not only did Bob Mueller not want to be there, but he didn't have a good grasp of the information that was contained in his report. Listen, I've been in that seat. I've been in that committee. I've sat there and answered questions for over 6 hours. So I know how hard that is. But at the same time, the preparation time necessary and his, the limited material of just having to talk about that report, I think was dramatic.
What happened there? You were the U.S. attorney when he was director of the FBI, right? So
Correct.
You know him. What do you think happened yesterday?
Yeah, again, it's hard to tell. I think he was the supervisor of an investigation that had many facets and parts. I'm worried that the team never looked at the predication for the underlying investigation. He didn't seem to. Well, he didn't seem to know what Fusion GPS is. He didn't seem to know sort of Glenn Simpson.
Why did they get started? Why did they do this thing anyway?
Why are we here? I mean, I think your panel earlier mentioned that you would always, if you took over an investigation, you would look at what's the predication. How do we have authority to even investigate this crime?
The genesis of all of this.
The genesis. Yeah. And the good news is I think John Durham, who's very capable, plus Horowitz are looking at these exact issues. And we need, after yesterday, I think America is going to demand answers as to these fundamental questions. Sure. As how did we get here, and how do we make sure this never happens again? Right. We can't have a cloud over a new incoming president for 2 years. I mean, it was completely unfair to President Trump to have this hanging over his head for 2 years.
And after the Mueller report came out, in black and white, it said we could not exonerate the president when it came to obstruction of justice, and that became a talking point. And yesterday, a couple of Republican congressmen said to Mr. Mueller, it's not your job as a prosecutor to exonerate. Yeah. Everybody is innocent until proven guilty. It's your job to find a crime and prosecute, not exonerate.
So in addition to being Attorney General and Chief of Staff at DOJ, there was a period of time for 5.5 years where I was a U.S. attorney, charged thousands of crimes. Not once did I ever stand at a podium, write a report, or file any filing that said I exonerate this person that we've been investigating.
Or I can't exonerate.
And so you end up, you charge with crimes or you decline to prosecute. And that's, I think we talked about that yesterday morning when I was here, and just how surprising part two is that it lays out all these facts without the analysis or really a charging decision. And that's yesterday, I think, laid bare this issue. And so the Democrats now, I think, are in a real challenging position as to what to do, because they've invested so much of their anti-Trump opposition to Bob Mueller and his report. And I think, we all saw it yesterday, that it's not as big and as strong and as difficult as maybe we thought it was. But listen, Congress needs to spend more time on making sure that the 2020 election is clean and uninterfered by foreign adversaries.
100%.
Yeah, I think in 2018, when I was Attorney General, right after I became Attorney General and when I was Chief of Staff, we did a lot and thought a lot, and FBI and all the intelligence community did. I think we did an appropriate amount to know what others were doing and to make sure and try to counter that. In 2016, I think the Obama administration completely laid down and didn't do enough and didn't really, from what I can tell, do anything.
They knew about it. They just didn't tell anybody.
They just watched it. It was like it was like an election monitor. I mean, they didn't do anything other than sort of just watch it play out.
Yesterday, he even said Russia's interfering right now as I speak. What do you think about impeachment? Because Politico did a story that Jerry Nadler immediately, or last night had a meeting and wanted to impeach, and Nancy Pelosi said no, 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 no. Here's what some of the 2020 Democrats are saying about that very issue. Listen.
Now, President Donald Trump did everything he could to obstruct justice.
That report is enough of an indication that the House of Representatives should begin impeachment proceedings against this president.
What are your thoughts about the fact that Mueller feels that the president is not exonerated from obstruction of justice?
Well, that's kind of what he wrote in his report, and he is not exonerated. Look, we know for a fact that the president did everything that he could to obstruct the Mueller investigation.
And they talk about Corey Lewandowski getting a call from the president to tell Jeff Sessions to recuse himself. They talk about Don McGahn saying, I'll quit if you're going to force me to go fire Bob Mueller. So that's all in the report.
And Don McGahn, I guess, backs up that report, and they're trying to force him to testify. So they're not dropping the ball there. Do those illustrations bother you?
From what I can tell, it is their best, in their minds, their best opposition to this president, because the economy is booming. We're finally doing something about our porous southern border. The president on every front is doing an incredible job leading this country into the future. And so all they have right now is the Mueller report, and it's crumbling. But I think, the impeachment idea is going to continue to separate Americans in the red and blue, and it's not going to be productive. And again, I look at Congress, and we wasted so much time and money yesterday on these hearings. Every one of those congressmen is getting paid by the taxpayers to do this job.
Where's immigration reform? Where's health care?
Right.
What are we doing about North Korea? You shot off missiles. The Iranian standoff that continues.
Yeah, there's so many other things that they could be working on.
Think about how much they spent for the last 2 years on this investigation.
$40 million, and it just, time and attention. It has been a distraction for a lot of folks, not only that are working directly on it, but are having to supervise it, having to be involved in it, and just in the American people. And I think the time is finally for true statesmen, stateswomen, patriots to step up and just say, this is a chapter, it's behind us. Let's move forward and solve these intractable problems that are facing us as a country.
Well, Matthew, yesterday was certainly an eye-opener. We finally heard from the man whose name was on the Mueller report. But remember, it all started with Rod Rosenstein, because after Mr. Sessions recused himself, Rod Rosenstein, kind of running the show, appointed Mr. Mueller, who then assembled this team. And now a lot of people are saying, well, exactly what kind of a team were they trying to put together if you've got a guy who's driving the car who was more of a figurehead?
Right. I think we heard, it has been reported that about the campaign donations and the political affiliations. I think this points to another example where the inherent bias of an investigator is the responsibility to investigate, to look inside themselves and say, can I be fair about this? It's my donation to Hillary Clinton, if I gave her thousands of dollars in the 2016 election, or other Democratic candidates, can I fairly and impartially investigate a Republican president? And that's a question that they all need to ask themselves. And they should have each gone to Bob Mueller and said,
Matthew,
and said, I have a problem.
You were the Attorney General, and they were working for you.
I know, and as I sat there in that chair and heard that criticism, I believed that each one of them had acknowledged in their own mind that they could be fair and impartial. And I think
still feel that way.
I do.
Even
however,
after you
part
read
two.
Some of those text messages?
So that report was after I was done, and so the challenge is, now knowing what we know was, were they honest with themselves and were they honest with their supervisors?
Matt, knowing what you know now, and you see Paul Manafort rotting in jail, Michael Flynn financially ruined, Jerome Corsi's reputation and finances have been drained, Roger Stone doesn't know if he's going to jail tomorrow.
George
Papadopoulos, although I think he's in the long run going to benefit, he still spent 2 weeks in jail and spent 2 years on ice. What does it say about all the people that are carnage along the way? Yeah. Roadkill.
Right. So each one of those cases is a very unique situation, and each one has its own facts and circumstances. In the case of the ones that did not tell the truth to investigators, that our whole American system of justice says that you need to be truthful if you're going to sit for an interview with the FBI. Then, secondly, you look at some of the other, like Paul Manafort and the crimes he committed.
With the Mike Flynn, that they said, the FBI agent said, we're not sure that he didn't misremember.
Well, and I think this is something that's very important. This is why we have an Inspector General. This is why we have John Durham. We need to look at this, and we need to learn the lessons to make sure it doesn't happen again, but to also make sure that those that are going to sit with the FBI and understand what they're getting themselves into if they're going to try to answer the questions. And you always need to be truthful. I mean, if you get asked a yes/no question and you answer, so those types of things
That's
are
what got
very
Martha
clear.
Stewart in trouble.
It is.
Do you have to answer questions to the FBI? Can't you just plead the fifth, or can you get your attorney to talk for you?
So you need an attorney. I mean, this is lesson number one is that before you are interviewed by the FBI, or really any law enforcement, you need an attorney and consult with them. And there's strategies that attorneys can employ to determine whether it's whether you should or shouldn't have that conversation. But you should never in my experience, has it been good for a subject, a target, or even a witness to say, "Oh yeah, I'll talk to you," and
I got nothing to hide.
Yeah, because oftentimes I think people try to convince you of a story. I saw this both as a prosecutor and as a defense lawyer. People try to convince you first that their story works and see if they can kind of charm you with their story, but the underlying facts, there's either text messages, bank records, all sorts of stuff. So, the bottom line lesson here is talk to a lawyer first and make sure you know what you're getting yourself into before you sit for an interview like that.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good legal advice from a lawyer.
That's right. It's free.
Talk to a lawyer. Fantastic.